This is an updated video on the series that I'm doing about Strapi. I have a previous video that I did on Strapi using Vue and Ionic Framework, and you can find it on my YouTube channel. I'll include the link below. And then also, if you hop around a bit, I have this other video series that I did that is based on, this one is Strapi with React.js. So you can pick your poison, determine which one you want. This is a 3-part series. What I realized was that the original series that I did on VueJS didn't really go into authentication, so that's what I'm here to do. I'm going to go into authentication in this video. The other thing I want you to know is that the login screens and the create account screens and basically authentication flow that I'm going to use, I'm going to copy from this free course that I have on Udemy. I encourage you to download it. It's a basic Vue CRUD application using VueJS and Firebase, and so some of the patterns that you'll see me use here are available there and discussed in much more detail. So now that we've done all the marketing stuff, please make sure you like and subscribe, and let's get to the code. So this is the application where we left it last time. It allows you to browse documents that are created in Strapi, a headless CMS. You can look at the previous video and get all the information on it. We have a dialog box that pops up that allows you to select the file, add a title, save a post, and have the post appear in this list. Right now there is no authentication involved, and so that's what we're going to quickly do in this video. We're going to integrate authentication into this application. As I stated, a bunch of this, the flow and the pattern that you're going to see is very similar to what I presented in my previous demo. Sorry, not in my previous demo, in the CRUD course that you can download for free from Udemy. So I'm really just going to copy over those screens, specifically the Ionic code, because it takes quite a bit of time to just type all that. And we really just want to get to the flow of how you actually integrate authentication. So let's get to it. The first thing we want to do is we want to make sure we add 2 additional screens. We're going to add a login view and we're going to add a create account view. So let's get to that first. Let's go to our view section. We're going to create a login.view. And we will also create an, what are we going to call this? Create ACC-UNT. Now, to get this set up, let's do our VBase reactive, except these all come from Vue now. And we are going to, we're not going to run refs. We will have a ref, which will, I was going to say it's a type any, and I can't type. And we are going to create an email and password And let's get make sure we have our ref included. This is a ref. And then also for Ionic, we're going to need define component. Let's add that in there too. All right, so we have ref, arguments I'm using TypeScript. Oh yeah, we need to set our script here to TypeScript because we're using TypeScript here in this video. So let's get that straight. All right, home. Way you do that is just put the line TypeScript on the end there. Where is that? Right here. So for the create account, because we're going to need an email and a password for create account also. But let's copy this code. We wanted to start with login first, so let's go over to home and let's go to login, and we'll paste that code in here. Let's put a name on here. Name login. And then, as I said, a lot of the Ionic template stuff is pretty template based, and so I'm just going to cut and paste it over, and then we'll walk through kind of what it is that I did. Okay, so here's our template. We're not going to use an alert here. We're going to keep it pretty straightforward. So let's take the alert code out, and let's kind of start to walk through what we did. Let's take our credentials down here, and we're going to name this credentials. And so what we're doing here is we have our basic Ionic screen, we have our header page, we have our email input. We're using the V model to bind what you enter in the email to credentials.email. Same thing, V model credentials.password, and then we have our login button. And then here's where we keep the credentials, the email and password, and then clearly we need to return our credentials so they can be accessed, in the template, along with our do login function. So let's put our do login down here in the credentials, and then let's add our const do login. All right. And then since do login will most likely be asynchronous, let's add async on there, put a little header on top, and we should be good to go. And let's fix this. This is CSS. And then now the other thing we need to do is let's add this view to our router. So let's go over to index router, and we'll just add a path right up here. And what we're going to do since we're not going to go deep into saving sessions and stuff like that, we are going to also login component is login. And let's add import our component here. So we'll just copy this code, switch this to login, and so we set our default path. And what we're going to do now is we're going to switch and set our default path to login. So that's the first screen we see every time. Okay, now it's complaining because it's got some TypeScript errors, so let's go and see if we can address those. So we want to wrap this whole thing with define component. It helps with the TypeScript. So let's wrap this whole guy with define component. And then now it's got an empty async here, so let's return null. Okay. So now let's go home. And now we're on our login screen. So, and then let's do this. Let's verify that. Let's just set a simple alert. And then we're going to JSON stringify this on stringify credentials. And then remember, inside of your code here, you need to go to values. All right, must use value. So let's just put something in there and log in, and then, oh, we did not get our credentials. Let's see what happened. Oh. Okay, now that we have everything all set up and all of our values returned, the part that we're missing is we have to actually import all of these Ionic components. That's where we're not getting any values back. So let's just, as I said, I don't want to waste a bunch of time typing this in, so we're just going to copy over all the import statements. So we'll put the import statements here. And then another thing I'm starting to do in my videos is to kind of get all of the noise out of this area here where you're coding. I'm going to put all of the components at the bottom. So normally I put my components at the top here, but then it's just a pain to kind of scroll down through the code. So I'm going to start putting them down in the bottom here. So what I'll do is at the end of my component, right before we get out, we'll just list all the components at the bottom. This way, as we're looking at code, we don't need to scroll through all of them. All right, so this is talking about Ion Alert, and we don't need Ion Alert, so let's remove Ion Alert from our list of components, and let's remove it from down here. And now let's see what we get. So when I log in, see, now we're getting our values. So that was it. Once again, I just hadn't imported my components. So now we have our basic login screen working. All right, so the next step is how do we actually make the calls to Strapi to get the appropriate API calls working. So let's take a look at how Strapi says that works. Okay, so here we are, and if we look at the Strapi documentation, which I'll link below, it basically says to log in, you set the identifier, which is a username, and then you set a password, and then you do a post to auth local, and then you'll get a response, and in that response, you'll get the user information, and you'll get the JWT, which is a token that you need to kind of make API calls, authenticated API calls. So since we have already have examples of where we're using, where's our code here? Let's scroll down. We're using fetch for the most part. We're going to stick with fetch. So let's just copy this code to kind of get us started. And we'll go back to our login, and we will go into our login page, and we'll embed this code here for localhost. As the documentation said, to make the authentication call, the path is now auth local. We are doing a post, and so what we need to do is we need to add some additional data, some additional options on fetch to make it work. Clearly we need our body, and here our body is going to be JSON. Actually, it's basically this. We're stringifying our values. Where are we going? But I think they're looking for identifier. So let's do this. Let's comment this out. Let's just do exactly what they have. And so we'll take their identifier and their password, and we'll drop that in here. And then we'll change this to be credentials.value.email. And this next one will be credentials.value.password. And then the other thing I believe we're gonna need, let's see, where's yeah, well, this isn't what we want there, so let's comment this out. I think the other thing that we're gonna need to do, if I look at home, that's the post. I think the add item, I think we need to set the context type. Let's see. Yeah, we need to set the context type to application JSON. So let's just copy this code here. Let's go to our login, and let's drop that in here. So we have our URL, which is the auth local. We have our content type, application JSON. We have our, it needs to be a post. And then we will pass in the required parameters, which is identifier and password based on the documentation. And then based on what we saw from the documentation, our successful response, we should get a data object. So let's do this. Let's say const data, which we'll pull out of the response, and then let's just console log it for now. And we'll take a look in the console and see what we're getting. Actually, let's do this. Let's return it. Let's return it to the UI. And so to do that, let's go like this. Login response value equals data. And then we'll go up here and we'll just create another ref for that so we can get on the screen. So we'll say const. Actually, let's just do this. I don't need yeah, because I need the screen to respond. So I have to say const login equals ref any. We'll just set it to null to get started. Okay, so we're going to take the response that we get from our login. We're going to set our value here. Then we're going to turn that to the screen as a rest value, copy. And then let's go up to our UI, and underneath the login, let's just dump it out to see what we get back. Okay, so let's try and log in this guy. And this is the response we get. Identifier password is invalid. This has no idea. It's like, who is this guy? We cannot log this guy in. So get out of here. So that is the response that we're getting from our login. So at least we know, let's try and log in one more time. At least we know that we are reaching our endpoint. So we know our login is doing what it's supposed to do. So let's take the next step and let's see if we can find an actual user that exists. So let me go to my backend as the admin. So let's go in here to a user. Let's find the user that we know has been validated. Let's edit him. Let's go in and change his password into something that we know. So we're going to change it to password123. Let's save that. Let's go back to our page. Let's reset everything. Let's log in with that user. And that user was Aaron at Gmail. Let's go back and check it to make sure we get it right. Gmail +1. +1. And then let's password 123. Let's try to log in now. Okay, and so we successfully were able to log in. You see we're getting our user object back, and we have our user object with the email, the information, the role, it's an authenticated user, and then we have this token, and this is the token that you need to do to make all the appropriate API calls. Well, we're not covering that in this video. We're just focusing on creating an account and logging in. So I just showed you how to log in successfully, and this is the login information. So now let's switch back to our code and focus on implementing a create account. So let's get that going. Let's shrink this back down to the side. Actually, let's do one last thing. If I get here, which means I didn't get an error, we're going to just redirect you back to the home page. So to redirect you back to the home page, it should be as simple as just doing a use history and setting the path. And so we'll use our router, and we'll replace and we'll send you to the home route, but we need to get access to our router, and you get access to your router. We're going to use the use router helper. So we can say const router equals use router. And you can see that it automatically imported it for us. So let's try and log in. It looks like it kind of saved all my credentials for me. So let's try and log in. There's this information. Login was successful. And so here I am on my page. Okay, so now we're going to kind of move on to the next part, which is actually the create account. Because if you recall, the create account is kind of empty. Let's take a look back over at the Strapi documentation. And here they talk about login. Let's see, and here they have registration on the top. Similar API call, except you provide a username, an email, and a password, and then you use this local register instead of local auth. And so we could copy a lot of the code that we've already used for login, for registration. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, so let's kind of start off by moving over. We know we're going to need all of these functions, so let's just take all of them. We'll go over to our create account, and we will take all of this and we'll replace that because we're going to need to import all of them. We also know that we are going to need to get access to all of our components. So let's just kind of take everything from components down. Let's copy that. Let's go over to my create account. At the end of our setup is where we want to put basically everything. So now at the end of our setup, let's format that. Actually, let's go back to our login screen, because from our login screen, we want you to be able to go to create account. So let's add a button onto our login screen. So right now there's a login button. Let's add a create account button. And then here, I believe that we can just keep this simple. So I can get my router, push, and that should push us to the next page. Did I get everything right? Oh, it's got this router link thing still here. Let's get this out of there. Let's go back to our login page. Let's go back home. Let's click create account. We didn't add the route. Let's go add our router. Let's put a name for our path. And then let's change it to the component create account. This component we want to have access to, and let's add it here. Get this name, create account, create account. Okay, let's go to create account and see if that's looking good. It doesn't have anything in here. So let's take all of the content here. Let's just take the whole thing. Create account, replace all this. So now we have our create account page. This is create. And we need another value for our credentials, because remember, so let's copy and put this username, credentials, username. And so now we have 3 credentials that we want to copy. So let's get credentials from over here. She will just take all of this. Everything from the top is set up. Go to create account. So we're going to need the router. Let's call this registration response. Credentials, we need a username. Let's make sure we return all this stuff. So we got to return credentials. Do create account. We haven't do create ACCOUNT. What else? Do create account. Create. Here, all you're going to create the account, or you're going to cancel. And on cancel, we're just going to have the router go -1, which will take it back. Okay. Now, what doesn't it like? What did I miss? Create account view, line 41. It's missing a semicolon. Okay. Create account, create account. Let's put our name in here. Name. Create account. Put a comma on the end there. We have our setup. Return. Components. Yeah, something. Oh, we need to define component here. Let's wrap that with the define component. Wrap that. Okay, I can tell that something is not right because it's not formatting. So let's see if we can see what it is. Well, it needs this function. Do create account. Let's put a placeholder. Registration rep has not been used. So let's comment this out. So we put that code in. Let's see, unexpected empty arrow function. Let's do console log credentials. So that guy's happy. All right, create account. So create account and then cancel. Takes me back to login. Takes me to create account. Let's change this button color so that I kind of know what's going on. So let's go to create account, and for cancel, let's say color equals danger. So I know that I'm actually canceling. And then we have our username. Let's also kind of fix these labels because that looks kind of jarring. So I think it is position fixed. Let's see if that is it. I don't actually remember the label position off the top of my head. Yes, it looks like it is fixed. So yeah, so that kind of lines all of them up. And then let's test our create account. So this can be new guy, create account. And let's take a quick look at our console. And we got the values that we need. We have the email, password, and the name. So now all we have to do is call the function, which is based on a documentation that was provided. And then we're going to change this login response to, what are we calling it? Where did I say? Oh, let's uncomment this. Registration response. So we're going to dump our registration. We're going to follow the exact same process. We'll dump our registration response, see that everything's working the way it's supposed to work, and then we'll just connect it and reroute the pages. So like I said, we're following a similar pattern as before. Let's just bring this back to revisit. We need to set username, password, email. Then we get our responses. We move on. The only difference is this path that we're going to is local register. So let's go to our login view. Take a look at our function. We're going to just take it all. It's just easier to just take it all. So let's take everything. All right. Copy all that, and we'll go to our create account. Okay. So now we're in do create account. We want to log our credentials, accept auth. That's auth local register now, register. Application context. We want to set the username, should be the username. Actually, let's copy this first. So username is username, user, and then the email is email. So that's for posting. We're getting a response. Instead of login response, this is registration response. And then we'll console log with what that is. And let's comment this out for now because we want to take a look and see if everything's working. Okay. Let's see. Ref, username, email, password. Let's make sure up here our username is our username, email, password, create account, auth register, application JSON, stringify, credentials, username, email, password. Okay, let's refresh and see what it's complaining about. Await is only allowed. Oh yeah. Let me put async on here. Okay. And then what we also want to do is all right. I think that we're ready to give this a try and see if we actually can get a user created. So let's try with what we already have and see if it gives us an error because this email and password are the same. Let's try create account, new password 1. Did I not return? Oh, I didn't return this, so it's not going to display in the UI. So let me return that and make sure, yes, it's there. So let's try again. So we're getting our nice error message telling us that this email is already in use. So we need to use another email. So let's just keep this simple and just say new guy 1. We'll change this email to new guy 1. Change this new guy 1, and then let's change this to just plain password PASSWORD123. Let's create an account. Okay, so it created our new user. Everything is all set. Default role is authenticated. It was done, so we know our authentication is working. And then let's now just put in the last piece, which is transitioning to home after you register a user successfully. And now let's also just check to see if we can log in with my new guy. So I have my new guy. I don't want to create an account. I want to actually cancel. There's my information and log in. So it accepted it and I'm logged in as new guy. There's a bunch more you can do here, but for this video, because I think we're probably about 30 minutes or so, we really just wanted to focus specifically on showing you how to create a user and how to log in with the user. Maybe if there's interest in a follow-on, we will start to work with protected routes and start to show you some other interesting things with it. Thanks a lot, and if this is something you find interesting, please make sure you like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you want to see more. I basically did this video because someone specifically asked about it, and I like to just create content that people want to see. So thanks and take care. Bye.